Uh, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think Scott Mendelson actually might have a good point here. How's it going, everybody? This is Phil. Every once in a while, this guy puts out an article, and it's based in some kind of reality where he isn't shilling, and he's kind of just laying it out there. One of the things with Scott Mendelson is when you read his articles, he gets bogged down with a lot of minutia, and he likes to throw numbers around, and sometimes it almost seems like he tries to be sensational with his articles and how he titles them and the content, just so he could drive traffic and get a whole bunch of clicks and kind of earn his keep as a contributor to Forbes. That being said, this is an article over at Forbes.com, and the title is "Box Office: Why Hollywood is No Longer Afraid of Star Wars," which is it's really the case right now these days, the way things are, there's room at the table for a lot more people, because when a Star Wars movie gets released, it doesn't hold the same cachet that it once did. You look at what happened with Solo. That was kind of the fork in the road. We all knew that The Last Jedi was an underperformer in a sense that it made about a third less than what The Force Awakens did, and a lot of that was due to once fans showed up initially and word got out, people started to avoid the film, and a lot of repeat business. These fans that are diehards that go back and they see these movies over and over again during its theatrical run, they help pad the box office. And I've heard people who went to see The Force Awakens, upwards of 8 or more times. And that wasn't the case necessarily with The Last Jedi. I don't know anybody who saw the movie more than once, and certainly not 8 times. I've never heard of anybody saying they've gone to see that movie 8 times. So, and then after that, you look at Solo, and they could barely get people to see that movie once. So anybody has a chance now to make money at the box office in and around a Star Wars movie release. It's not the big bad that it once was before. So let's get into Scotty Boy's article over here. So you could see him there with that look on his face that it just makes you want to get that Ryan Johnson fist out and and throw that emoji up and punch him out. But we won't do that here. No violence. So again, this is Scott Mendelson. He is a contributor over at Forbes, Hollywood Entertainment, and he says, I cover the film industry. So he really doesn't list a lot of credentials here. So my name is Phil. And I make YouTube videos about people who make articles about Star Wars. I like to talk about Star Wars, and I also like burritos. So there we go, Scott. Now we all know each other, and we can proceed. So, and again, Scott gets bogged down sometimes. So this is an article where I'll probably skip over a few parts, but we just want to get the basic premise of what's going on here. So let's move forward, shall we? Okay, so. Isn't it a surprise that Universal Comcast Corp. has moved Wicked away from its initial December 20th, 2019 release date? I wouldn't be surprised. Look, as far as Star Wars has fallen, it's still, this is episode 9, and quote unquote the end of the Skywalker saga, even though we all know it's kind of been over for a while now at this point. With Luke relegated to a Force Ghost, and apparently Rey having no lineage, there is no real Skywalker saga to talk about. But of course, JJ is pulling all the stops out. So just for the spectacle that this movie may end up being, it's wise, I would think, to just steer clear of it. It just makes good business sense. So aside from the whole Star Wars Episode 9 opens on December 20th as well factor, there is a simple fact that we haven't heard anything about the movie since it was announced 2 years ago. They're talking about Wicked. So the big news isn't that Wicked has been indefinitely postponed. For me, that was never big news. No. The big news is that Universal has swapped out the adaptation of one popular and kid-friendly Broadway sensation with another. As of moments ago, we now know that Cats, I didn't even know they were making a Cats movie, will be opening on that day instead of Wicked. I would think they should just clear out, really. I mean, we know that Star Wars, again, isn't going to... it doesn't scare people the way it did, but I mean, is Cats really counter-programming? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It just seems like... Yeah, maybe. Who knows? It's alternative programming, I guess. Universal and the working titles Cats is, of course, based on the Andrew. See, Scott goes off the rails here. He talks all about cats. I don't give a hairy cat's ass about all of this information here. Scott says, no, I don't know who will star as the various anthropomorphic cats as they compete in a form of cat purgatory, or is that purgatory? Jesus Christ, Scott. You know what? Leave the bad joke telling to me over here. For a chance at essentially reincarnation, blah, 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 no one cares about. The biggest threat to Episode 9 won't be Star Wars fatigue, or The Last Jedi backlash. Nice of you to acknowledge that that's a real thing, but rather the sheer number of kid-friendly biggies opening on all sides. So, I mean, I don't know. Is Cats going to be a family-friendly deal? Is it going to be an animated movie? Is it going to be people in cat suits? I don't really know what that's all about. If anybody, I don't feel like researching. If anybody knows, comment down below. Okay, to wit, Star Wars Episode 9 will have to face off against Jumanji 3, opening on December 13th, while Fox's Death on the Nile, repercussions from the Disney-Fox deal notwithstanding, will open against Cats and Wicked on the 20th. And that presumes that the November biggies, specifically Wonder Woman 1984 and Frozen 2, aren't still kicking around alongside the less surefire Sonic the Hedgehog and Terminator. This Terminator, I don't know what to expect from that. Sonic the Hedgehog, I haven't seen anything on that either. I really have to start investigating what's going on with that movie. I'm curious as to what form that takes. Wonder Woman and Frozen are two movies that could have legs that could really make their way into December. But I think at the time Disney Lucasfilm's Star Wars finally hits the theaters, these movies should have tailed off enough to whereas they're not cannibalizing the audience for Episode 9. But Jumanji could very well still be making big bank. It's only a week later, and that movie did well, surprisingly. And Cats and Wicked, again, it's alternative programming for that release date. So it's going to be interesting. There's a lot swirling around. December isn't there's not a dearth of movies like there used to be. A lot of people and a lot of studios look at the December month for releases as a very lucrative time of year, and it's been proven to be so for a while now. It's not a clear path for Disney to make big box office returns with Star Wars, the way it was when The Force Awakens came out. I mean, nobody wanted to be near that movie if you were a competing studio when it came out. I mean, everyone just knew better. But now people are like, yeah, well, whatever. We'll roll the dice and see what happens, see what shakes loose. So it's a crazy place that we find ourselves in, where a Star Wars movie doesn't command that kind of respect anymore. But this is something that slowly happens to the franchise with a lot of these bad decisions that were made over the last several years. So does this mean that folks are smelling blood in the water at the Jedi Temple? Yes and no. The blowout success of Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, and The Greatest Showman showed that big, family-friendly movies could thrive alongside the Star Wars movie over the holiday season. And yes, Universal and Illumination's Sing, itself an animated musical, earned $270 million worldwide alongside Rogue One. I don't even remember that movie. Becoming the biggest never number one domestic grosser of all time. It's not that the industry thinks Star Wars is weak, but rather that they've realized that they can be strong alongside of it. And that's a very valid point. You don't have to kill Star Wars necessarily to still make money alongside of a Star Wars movie. and people are willing to take that chance more so now than ever. Unless the Star Wars franchise gets back to a place where it once was, which it's probably it's a long shot it could ever achieve that again. You're going to see competing movies in and around the Star Wars franchise going forward, and there's going to be options for people when there used to never be. So that can hurt week 2 for Disney. Big movies going up against it, it could hurt week 1. And certainly it'll hurt it as it gets into week 3, 4, 5, and 6. And a lot of these movies, they make most of their money, the bulk of it, within the first week, and then they drop down, maybe 40%, 50%, 60% the following weekend, and then from there it's a precipitous fall. Like, it just continues to go, and then it's just the movies just they make their paces, they go through their run, and they make whatever they can along the way. But it's those first few weeks, and if you have a lot of movies that are coming out that aren't afraid of Star Wars, and they're competing for that same kind of box office dollar that Star Wars makes its bulk of its receipts on, that's going to be a problem going forward. And they're going to see diminished returns as more and more studios put out strong titles and don't fear the Star Wars franchise and brand like they used to. So let's see here. Okay, more importantly, in my opinion anyway, is the idea that Star Wars will eventually be a kind of for the fans only franchise. That's no slight, as the same applied to the likes of Harry Potter, Twilight, and The Hunger Games in the end. That's why Skyfall was able to earn $303 million domestic from a $90 million debut, right alongside the Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2, opening with see, here he goes crazy with this stuff over here. If you have a franchise, even a really big franchise, that mostly plays to the fans, the rest of the movies in the marketplace may well play as if that biggie didn't exist. It's not like that many people were going to drive out to see Skyfall, get sold out, and then go to the Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2. Although they should have, as that film's action climax is every bit as awesome as anything in the 007 flicks. Oh, Scott. And those wanting to see Mockingjay Part 2 were only going to see Mockingjay Part 2. So again, there is something to be said about that. So if the Star Wars fan community is that big, and we all know that when everybody's on the same page, it's a huge fandom. All right. So right now it's fractured, and you have people butting heads, and you have people who like The Last Jedi, people who hate The Last Jedi, people who support everything that comes out, people who don't want anything to do with Star Wars anymore. There's people who are kind of in the middle. They'll give it a chance, they'll go see Solo, but they didn't like The Last Jedi, but they still want to support it. So everybody's kind of all over the place, but a unified Star Wars fan community they will show up in droves to see movies that they feel are quality Star Wars entertainment. And if everybody is on board with it, so like let's say you roll out your Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, that could be a unifying film that brings everybody from all sides of this fan community back together into the theaters. The point that Scott's making is the insulated audience, this Star Wars audience, is large enough. It's huge. It's big enough to actually support the type of tentpole franchise blockbuster box office receipts. Star Wars is big enough where it can be its own monster in that regard with the box office. So again, a valid point by Scott. I'll give him that much. So now the hope among Hollywood is that Star Wars will eventually become a for the fans series, which will allow everything else alongside it to prosper. The reason the MCU event movies, specifically the ensemble flicks and breakouts, tend to be somewhat damaging to their competition, be it Captain America Civil War snuffing out the early summer adult fare, or Black Panther steamrolling over the spring franchises, is that they play to the fans and to essentially every demographic in terms of general moviegoers. Conversely, the Zack Snyder DC film flicks, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, and Justice League, essentially played as fan-only affairs. Suicide Squad branched out as the last biggie of the summer, and Wonder Woman became enough of an everyone into the pool event movie that it dinged everything else that opened in June. We'll see how Aquaman plays out this Christmas, but I've long argued that the DC Films franchise is a kind of Twilightish for the fans brand is fine as long as the budgets reflect the reality. As long as a fans only ceiling for Star Wars is tall enough, we're really going to start weeping if a standard Star Wars movie only earns $400 million domestic. This would be a win for the industry. And movies like Rogue One would come out, and all right, they don't do Force Awakens type box office, but they are considered to be successes because they're not part of the main saga. And that was probably a movie, Rogue One, that was supported by the fan community in large part. Those box office receipts. Now, there's obviously people who see Star Wars, they'll go see Star Wars, and they might have thought that it was a sequel to The Force Awakens. Some of the general audience, they're just not that informed. But Rogue One was kind of a fan fantasy film, in a sense. And you see the community supported that, the fandom supported that, and that's probably the litmus test. Okay, that's an indicator of what you can expect when these movies come out, and if they just play to the Star Wars audience and they're not insulting the audience and they're good movies, well, then maybe you can expect $1 billion. If you make $1 billion every time out and you're spending $150 million on your budget and then maybe double that for marketing, you're not doing that bad. Okay, you're in the lower tier of the Marvel movies, which they'll make 750 to $1 billion. That's nothing to sneeze at. The thing is, it's just not what we come to expect from Star Wars, but maybe this is the direction Star Wars is heading in. And if that's the case, box office for me isn't the last, it's not the end all be all. Box office is nice, it's bragging rights, but I far prefer the movie to be good first and foremost. If nobody goes to see The Empire Strikes Back, well, probably you don't get Return of the Jedi, but if Empire Strikes Back makes half the box office it did, it's still a good movie. That same exact movie. If the movies are quality, I don't care where the box office ends up. Now, the thing with the box office is that if you get bad box office, you don't get more of these movies. You don't get sequels. All right. I mean, look what happened to Solo. Alden Ehrenreich was signed to a 3-picture deal. We don't know if that's ever going to come to fruition now, after what happened with Solo. So there is something to be said about box office giving the studios incentive to keep moving forward. But if Disney reels in their expectations, I'm all right with these movies coming out, and there could be competition in the theaters for them, and everybody can win. All right, because we'll get back to a place where Star Wars is actually good. The studios are happy. The fans are happy. Everybody comes out on top, and we finally get to a place where we can stop bitching at each other and start on and just kind of debating who's the stronger Jedi and what's the cooler vehicle and things like that. So let's see. What else does Scott really have to say here? He goes on to talk about a couple other movies. Okay, so look, that's really it. Like I said, Scott brings up some valid points here, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to perhaps see Star Wars find itself as a for the fans series franchise. And look, Star Wars was kind of for the fans when it went away. Right, after Return of the Jedi, there was several years where Star Wars was for the fans. So who was renting those movies out? Those 3 movies, those original trilogy movies. It was the fans, and they were buying up the VHS box sets, and and then they bought the DVDs and they bought the Blu-rays. And Star Wars has always been a for the fan franchise in a sense. After it took over the world, the fans then took it upon themselves to keep the franchise alive, and they looked after it. Star Wars does have a universal appeal, and that's something that is marketable and valuable as a brand to Disney. But at a certain point, you have to come to the realization that what you have may not be what you thought it was. And the damage that this franchise has taken, it might not ever be able to get back to that point. That doesn't mean that it can't be lucrative. There's a lot of money to be made in the Star Wars universe by Disney and Lucasfilm. They just got to get everything back in order. And once they do that, and they start producing the quality movies and the television shows, and the animated the animated shows, Star Wars Resistance is not looking so hot these days, but if the Clone Wars, we can get more stuff like Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, maybe even some really good surprise made for streaming service movies, I think everyone would be happy. Disney will be able to sell merchandise. They'll be able to cross-market with their theme parks, their movies, their television shows. The fans will get quality entertainment and stories and characters that they can finally get behind once again. And we might find ourselves in just a really, really good place. It's going to take some time. It's not going to be overnight, but it is a possibility. And I'm okay with it if it ends up being a for the fans type of franchise. So that's really it. And what do you guys think about it? Is it important for you that Star Wars makes all the money in the world? Or, I think most people would just want to say, let's get some good stories and some good characters, and just let's get the quality back to where it needs to be. Look, that was never too much to ask for, and I think it's all we really want. Anyway, what do you guys think? Does Scott have a valid point here? What about burritos? Do you like burritos? What's your favorite type of burrito? Anyway, if you like this video, please hit that like button. And if it's your first time here, feel free to hit the subscribe and hit the notification bell. And next time I post a video, you'll be the first to know. Thank you all for watching. And be happy, be safe, be healthy. Have a great day. Bye.